Thank you so much, Jude. That was amazing. Hearing the ageless wisdom discussed and perceived through scientific eyes is staggering. I'm reminded of the statement that I've often heard within the Theosophical Society, that science will one day be the greatest ally of the ageless wisdom teachings. And here it is. We are all so grateful to have you here to answer questions for us. And the first question, given that there is only one energy and all else, material and non-material, are different vibrational forms of that energy, if an individual feels intense feelings of connection, of love and joy with that oneness, do those feelings have an effect on all that exists, human and all else?
Thank you, Barbara. First of all, it's lovely to be with everyone. And thank you for that wonderful first question. Yes, is the answer. We are innately unified. We are literally inseparable from the whole world. And the way that our world emerges from deeper levels of causation is as information, meaningful information, expressed in complementary ways as energy, matter, and space and time. So literally all energy matter is informed as we are. So, but the way that it does that is wonderful, because as we all probably know, energy matter is quantized, which means it comes in little packets. It's not a continuum, but that means it's rather like notes of music. And also all energy matter has vibration and frequency, again, like music. So if you think of it in those terms, the whole of our universe is rather like a cosmic symphony. And then when we are, and we're part of that, we're an inherent part of that. So when we feel that connectivity, we're just consciously resonating, harmonizing with the entirety of the whole world, which, as I've said, we understand now, we have the evidence for, before it was theoretical, is a non-locally unified entity that exists and evolves as such.
How beautiful. That makes me think how important it is to send out that energy to the world, because it does impact the love, the oneness, the compassion, that it really does impact the world and all in it.
Yes, it does. And equally, we are informed by the whole world. So there is this to and fro, continuous informational sounding, the dialogue, throughout all time. And of course, it also means that we are able to access non-local information, as I've mentioned. So actually tuning into that offers us insights and guidance and wisdom. I mean, this is how the ageless wisdom essentially presented itself.
Oh, wow. Thank you. So another question, they're piling up now. So thank you so much for your presentation. How do you see dark matter and dark energy as an expression of a cosmic mind and the holographic nature of our universe? And then a follow-up question, will this ultimately be found to be physical or something tied to a higher dynamic?
Well, everything's tied to a high dynamic. Everything we call our universe emerges from what we might call non-physical, deeper, more fundamental levels of causation, of information, meaningful information. And so the entire energy matter, the entire appearance of our universe, of energy matter and space-time, is that emergent perspective. In terms of dark matter and dark energy, as far as we have a sense of, they are aspects of what we might call our physical universe. But of course, going back to what I just said, they too are part of the unified entity that we're speaking of here, a multidimensional entity that we're speaking of here. Now, we don't yet really know. We haven't got the evidence for what dark matter is. Some suggest that it doesn't actually exists, that in fact it's a modification of Newtonian dynamics. We're getting very nerdy here, so I won't go down that route. But the most likely explanation at the moment is that it's a very weakly interacting particle that just interacts by gravity, but that would still make it part of our physical universe and acting as a scaffold for all the visible energy and matter to sort of, rather like foam on the surface of an ocean, where the ocean is the underpinning. That's the dark matter aspect of what we see as visible energy matter. Dark energy is different. It looks as though, again, the best explanation we have for dark energy at the moment is that it's in innate tension within space-time. So it's rather like when you blow up a balloon, there's a tension as the balloon expands. But in the case of dark energy, it actually enables a life cycle of our universe to undertake itself. So space expands, because otherwise, if everything was gravitational, it would attract and space would never get going in terms of its expansion. And it's vital that it does expand. So dark energy may be an innate expansionary tension in what we call space-time. But either way, it's all part of the whole. And going back to the holographic principle, the point there is that all that we now understand from black holes and beyond is that the 3D space appearance of our universe is actually informationally projected from a holographic boundary of what we call space. We're going to have to get our heads around considering physicality to be a lot less physical than we thought, but nonetheless real. But everything in describing not so much in terms of energy, matter, and space-time, but informationally manifested or expressed in complementary ways as energy, matter, and space-time. This is going to get, just as the ageless wisdom did, it didn't suddenly everybody went, oh, aha, and everybody got it immediately. But this is integrative and convergent with universal wisdom teachings and into spirituality. But its languaging, its concepts are ones that, you know, the more we become familiar with them, I think the more people go, of course. You know, it's that one of those things, isn't it? When you get used to something, the familiarity of it, and there's a deep sense of the truth of this, as well as the evidence base of it, a deep sense of the truth of this that is really engaging people with it.
Wow. Thank you. So the next question. To begin, what might the new images from the James Webb telescope tell us about space-time and a holographic universe information? And what is the concept of time implicit in a holographic fractal universe?
Okay, let's go to the last point first, if I may.
Okay.
What I wrote about in the cosmic hologram, it shows not just the evidence, but how our universe comes together, the appearance of our universe of energy, matter, and space and time. So, and both as information, meaningful information, but expressed in complementary ways. So meaningful information expressed in quantized vibrational ways as energy, matter. But with space-time, first of all, we know from Einstein that we have to bring space and time together as space-time to enable our universe to exist and evolve. What this new understanding is showing is that from the beginning, 13.8 billion years ago, as I talk about being the first moment of an ongoing big breath, then as space expands and time flows, more and more information can be expressed in the universe. The first, the energy matter, enables our universe to exist, but it doesn't speak at all about time. The second law of thermodynamics, which I write about in that book, expressed in informational terms, talks of space-time. And the point is that all the information which is held on the boundary of what we call our universe, the more space expands, the more information there is. But the more time flows, every moment of time flowing forward, rather like I'm old enough to be at cinemas where they had the projectors. You're too young, Barbara, but I remember. And, you know, there were so many frames of a film within, say, a minute okay? And for argument's sake, let's say there are 100 frames per minute. Each frame was a static frame holding a piece of information. But when those frames ran together, you had the appearance of the film, yeah, going from past to present, okay? Our universe does the same, but if our films are 100 frames per minute, our universe, the frame time of our universe is literally, let me get this right now, is 1,000 trillion frames per second.
Oh, wow.
Wow. It's called the Planck scale time. In fact, more than that, actually, because it's 10 to the minus 44. I do apologize. I've underestimated it by about 1,000 times. But it's literally that enormous amount of information. It's like all the frames, every moment at the Planck scale is adding more information to our universe. And that's why space has to expand and time has to flow from its beginning 13.8 billion years ago all the way through to now. The past is the past. The future is yet to come into being. But that's how our universe evolves.
Wow. I am so grateful to you for I am not a scientist. I don't think I have a scientific bone in my body. And I am so grateful to you for putting this into language that even I can understand. So I'm very grateful.
Bless you. And just to answer the question about James Webb, I'm very excited about James Webb because the spectrum of light that it's generally capturing is what's called the infrared, whereas the Hubble telescope primarily caught visible light. Now, the further back in time you go, the further out into the universe you go, the wavelengths of light coming from very ancient and very far away objects undergoes something called a red shift, which moves the light more and more into the red and into the infrared. So what James Webb hopefully is able to do is go back further in time, further out and further back in time, possibly to only a couple of 100 million years after the beginning of our universe, to show us how the first stars formed, and much closer to home, incredible detail of our solar system, and further out, to be able to look at what's called the spectrographs of stars and planetary systems. It may be able to pick up things like water vapor in an exoplanet's atmosphere to give us an idea, well, that planet might be somewhat similar to Gaia, which is a water planet and so nurtures biological life such as ourselves.
Well, that actually kind of goes with the next question, which is, do you know how the MIT experiment demonstrating attachment among photons originating billions of light years ago was conducted?
I do, but it's fairly complex as a scientific process. I can send the link out to you. You can send the link out. You can actually look at the scientific methodology they used to. I mean, entangling photons of light within a laboratory is a very tried practice. In fact, we've been able to entangle much larger than photons. We've been able to entangle organic molecules in the laboratory, small diamonds in the laboratory, outrageous. But what this does, it just took the starlight from stars 600 light years away as the source of that entanglement. And then it triggered the whole choice in the experiment, which actually proved that there were entangled, many thousands of entangled photons triggered by this quasar light from 12.2 billion light years away, and so leaving that quasar 12.2 billion years ago.
Wow. I would imagine that study would be relatively easy to Google as well.
It is.
So
it is. Yeah, it is.
So another question: why is it important to say non-local as opposed to local?
What the terminology is sort of quite precise. Local awareness are things of our five senses. I see you, I smell something, I taste something, I hear something, yeah? Non-local is when there is awareness beyond those five senses. So our intuition essentially is non-local. We can intuit something, whether we can see it or hear it or beyond those abilities to do that. And the other supernormal phenomena I showed in the slide deck with things like, synchronicities or telepathy, remote viewing. All of those are super normal. In other words, not supernatural nor paranormal, but they are non-local. In other words, they transcend the signals that we pick up within space-time. And we can do that because innately, at the most fundamental level, our universe is non-locally unified. Within space-time, nothing can go faster than the speed of light. Hence, if we look at our sun, don't look at it directly. Light from our sun takes over 8 minutes to reach us. If our sun suddenly disappeared, it would be 8 minutes before we knew about it. That's the speed of light. Whereas non-local awareness is spontaneous and it transcends. There is no signaling. It's actually that fundamental resonance with the underlying unity of our universe.
So once again, I'm reminded that when we send out that love and compassion, peace into the world, it's immediate because it is non-local.
Non-local, exactly so. Exactly so. And the other thing we don't know, really, although we can position our attention, intention, and attention, often we don't know what a random act of kindness, a smile, a gentleness, a hug, what are the ripples that flow out in that? And sometimes what appears very tiny can have enormous ripples.
And how extraordinarily important it is to remember that.
Vital.
So another question, this one is about Plato's forms. Stephen asks, your remarks about light refractions from structures brings to mind Plato's forms. I'm wondering about your thoughts on that and whether there have been correlations with specific forms, such as the Platonian forms themselves.
Very much so. Well, first of all, Plato's metaphor of the reality that we experience as being a reflection rather than direct is one that we're really, speaking to today. The cosmic hologram is a model that has its history way back in sort of metaphors such as Plato's cave and the ancient Indian tradition of Indra's net, where everything is interconnected with everything else and reflects everything else. So this new understanding is not new, it's ancient, but it's newly evidenced and in scientific terminology. So I think that's the first point. The second point is the idea of the Platonic idealism, that the manifest forms of our universe are ideals, ideational. In other words, mental constructs. Indeed is the case, but they're not human mental constructs. They're universal mind, consciousness constructs. And instead of the idealized Platonic shapes and solids, the 5 that start with the tetrahedron and move up to the icosa and dodeca, which are idealized in the sense that if we take very simply, we take a triangle, it has 3 sides, it has 3 interior angles. We can scale it up and scale it down, and those relationships between its sides and its angles remain the same. So is the case with what we call fractal shapes. But fractal shapes are not the idealized shapes of Plato. They are the sort of the idealized shapes are the fractal shapes taken to the end point. But when you go into the gritty, for example, the outline of a cloud or a coastline, they are relational. They are geometrically relational. They're not just the very simple, straightforward Platonic shapes, but they are very fundamentally the same in the sense that they can scale up and they scale down, and we find them from the scales of atoms to the whole universe.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen, for asking the question.
So, Sylvia, I'm going to shorten your question just a tiny bit to get to the most important point of it. We've got information from the rishis, the indigenous people, about the world being a web, as you mentioned, Indra's web, and the work of the emotion code. Given that groups are meditating for peace, why is there still war?
Okay, let's go back to the realization we're inseparable. So if we have a diseased body, even if we have healthy cells, they cannot express their foundational health if they're part of something that is still diseased. We have a worldview that is essentially diseased at the moment. We base it on a perspective of material separation. And when we have that worldview of a universe that is innately meaningless and purposeless, then we act accordingly because our worldview guides our choices and therefore our behaviors and our social structures. That's where we've come from progressively over the last few hundred years. What this is showing now is literally to turn it completely on its head, that instead we have a universe that meaningfully exists and purposely evolves, that we are too. We have innate meaning, but we still have a collective psyche that is still traumatized by centuries of material separation. Now, if we go to those underlying attractors that I talked about, if our collective consciousness is where it is at the moment or where it has been, then despite some wonderful initiatives, some incredibly marvelous linking up and lifting up and trying to cooperate and come together, if the collective consciousness is still primarily one of separation, perspective of separation, then the outcomes will be the behaviors we've seen. And now, when we can essentially raise our consciousness, evolve our consciousness, remember we're inseparable, then as we not only understand that, but begin to experience it and progressively embody it as a collective, as a human family, then our dis-ease heals. And there are many folks working today in the world, like Thomas Hübl, Gabor Mate, many, many others, who are sort of working to do the clearing up, as it were, for us and with us in terms of the trauma. And there are others that are hopefully showing the way of, if we can heal our trauma, if we can heal this illusion of separation, what wonders does that hold for us in our evolutionary journey going forward? So I would just say the more of us that are aware of this and bring this into our lived experience, the more the entirety of our attractor, that is our collective human consciousness, evolves, and naturally our behaviors. You know, if conflicts are a natural outcome of a world of separation, and so a worldview of separation and a world of suffering, then peace is the natural outcome of a whole worldview, when we remember we're inseparable and we live as unique, diverse beings in a universe of unity.
That is so lovely. And, you know, it reminds me of something that former international president of the Theosophical Society, In Sri Ram, said, which was that these ageless wisdom teachings are a hopeful teaching. That they're positive, that this is a paraphrase, of course, but, you know, hopeful and positive and moving forward.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a cosmology of a conscious and evolutionary universe of meaning and purpose. Its science is a science of love, and it too is offering us authentic hope, because it's the most fundamental perspective that we yet have in terms of nature, the true nature of reality. And of course, it converges and integrates universal wisdom teachings, ageless wisdom, indigenous teachings into spirituality.
Yes. Oh, thank you. And the next question, and again, there are plenty. We are not going to get to all of them, everyone. I just want to give you a heads up. We're doing our best. Have we reached a time when a materialist-only model can no longer be scientifically supported?
I don't think it's been able to be scientifically supported for at least 100 years. We knew when quantum physics came forward that the universe had to be not only non-locally unified in its entirety, but that the emergence of our universe did arise from deeper non-physical causations. One of the first things I had to learn is Schrodinger's equation, where, the superposition of a wave becomes particularized. And of course, my experiences since I was 4 years old show that it's through conscious interaction. But that, if you look at that equation, it involves not just physical aspects or physicalized aspects. It actually includes what's called phase space or complex plane aspects, which are not of themselves physicalized. So we've known it's just been ignored because the deeper connotations and implications of what that means has been peripheralized for the last 100 years. The clues have been there all along. Now, just as at that time, there were phenomena that you just couldn't ignore and could not be explained by the old paradigm. We're at that point now, and progressively more and more evidence is compelling to say we cannot stick with this old materialist separation paradigm.
Love that. Thank you. So I hate to say this, especially to people who are continuing to write in questions, but this is going to have to be our last question with Jude. Robert writes, I missed how contemporary models have concluded that consciousness is a primary reality. Vibrational frequencies alone still seem rather mechanical. Can you help clarify the evidence for the primacy of consciousness?
Thank you, Robert. That's a great question. I hoped I'd shown some of it in the PowerPoint, but I hate to say go buy my books, but on this particular occasion, I'm going to have to, because when I wrote The Cosmic Hologram and the story of Gaia, I was very clearly guided that I had to show the evidence for the primacy of consciousness and mind. And of course, what I'm talking about throughout is that what we talk about as energy, matter, and space-time are what we call emergent phenomena. They are not fundamental. And we're finding at all scales of existence that beneath, as it were, those, primary to those are these patterns of meaningful information that emerge at the Planck scale, this tiny, tiny, tiny pixelated scale of reality. But from there, they accumulate into atoms and plants and people and planets and the whole universe. But at the very fundamental level, there is this universal alphabet of ones and zeros, which of itself, like A's and B's, is meaningless. But when it's combined, just as our own language is combined into words and hear images and sounds through digitized technologies, then our universe does that with an alphabet, which is also digitized. But again, everything we call the reality of our universe is innately informed, meaningfully, purposefully informed, and existing to evolve.
Thank you so much, Jude. This has just been phenomenal. I think from my non-scientific perspective, it has been mind-blowing. And it really reminds me why, the importance of the second object of the Theosophical Society, to encourage the study of comparative religion, philosophy, and science. And in my own search, science hasn't been a strong component of that, but it is now. So thank you. Thank you for that personally, but thank you on behalf of all of the participants. It's just amazing.